And the people were flooding out, crossing the river, the Usumacinta, which is a big river, and going over any place to save the kids, save their families. And that was a surprise. And I think that was like a turning point in my life. And I heard myself saying recently that it was through Maryknoll that I found my vocation. My vocation is to save the kids. That has become the mantra within my life.
There's no question that today's episode of Among the People is going to leave you in awe as we sit down with Maryknoll Brother Marty Shea. He's a missioner from Chicopee Falls who's worked with the indigenous poor of Guatemala for over 50 years. His missionary journey since 1985 has taken him through the massacres in the jungles of El Peten to exile in Mexico to return with the people to their homeland in 1998. In today's episode, Brother Marty's going to talk about his life with the people in Guatemala and in the Mexican refugee camps. Brother Marty's also going to share with us his unique reflections on the refugee crisis that we face in America and the situations in Guatemala and Mexico and the realities of those refugees. So sit back, enjoy this episode of Among the People. We're certainly glad that you're with us. Let's get started.
Welcome, Brother Marty. As you know, the immigrant situation in the United States is quite critical, and the most shocking development in recent months is the separation of children from their families, from the very country where you worked, Guatemala, as well as Honduras and El Salvador. What's your understanding, what's your feeling about what we're doing to these families?
Well, first of all, I'd say it's not immigration, it's desperation. All these people are looking for is a moment to have life, to give life. And that's why we went over to Mexico into the refugee camps there. They're just trying to save the little that they have. So it really isn't immigration, but really they're just trying to, it's out of desperation and out of determination that they will have life and they will give life and they have a right to life.
Can you give us a little insight or background into the situation that these people are fleeing from?
Well, as you know, the situation in Central America, from Honduras, Nicaragua, no, not Salvador and Guatemala, it's very difficult. The overriding situation is drugs. And from that, you have gangs that control the sale, the movement of drugs. And then you have militarism. And I probably shouldn't mention it, but you have femicide, the killing of women because they have no rights or because they have left their compañero. It's serious in those countries. Sometimes we don't even like to talk about it. But the truth of the matter is that in Guatemala last night, 2 women died or were killed. A woman and a girl will be killed today. 2 today, 2 tomorrow. 2. When will it stop? It's kind of hard for me to talk about it.
Can we go a little deeper into that? Because this is probably new to a lot of our listeners. Can you explain femicide and what's the origin of that and where is that now?
Well, I've written a piece and it's gone out on internet, and I didn't get it any flack on it, together with global concerns. But it's difficult to explain. But the truth of the matter is, men have all the rights, and women don't have rights. So that if a woman left a man, what is he to do? It's kind of like in the Orient, I think they have a type of killing, honor killing or something. It's the same thing. It's madness. The military, if you read the book by Goldman, the military trained special forces, and one of the points of graduation was that you kill somebody. Gang warfare has picked up on that. And oftentimes, in order to be proven that you're gang worthy and gang true, you have to kill somebody. And it's most often women. So it's a very real situation. And I have been kind of working at this now for a couple of years. And there is an article in the internet. It's called something like Guatemala from Genocide to Femicide. And that's where I've come from all these years. I went through time of genocide. That's why the people went over to Mexico, and I went with them. Why? To save the kids. That was the common expression, save the kids. And they did. Many were saved. But then I dedicate this little Christmas booklet that I made to, it's here in the back of the book, dedicated to all the kids, those among the 200,000 that didn't survive during the years of genocide in Guatemala. Those that survived, these are their pictures and stories. And the new generation being born, bringing life back to life in this beautiful land. This is their story. This little booklet tells their story. And this is our story.
Can you give us a little background? You were there during the bad old days of the genocide. What was behind the terrible oppression of the indigenous groups in Guatemala?
Prejudice, that attitude towards indigenous, that attitude towards people who won't live and work as indentured slaves. Now, if you ask the military, they would say communism. These people wouldn't know a communist if he came up with a little red star in his hat. It's just, you have to create an enemy.
Right.
And so you call them a name. But more recently, they've stopped calling us communists, and now we're terrorists. That's the in word today. But it's sort of to justify having an enemy and having an army.
How many different languages are spoken in Guatemala? Do you have any idea?
Oh, I'd say about 22.
22 different languages, and only one of them is Spanish.
Yeah, one of them is Spanish.
But most of the indigenous won't speak Spanish, is that correct? Or do they all speak Spanish in addition?
No, they do well in Spanish. Mm-hmm. Now, there are some areas where women haven't had too much exposure, and you have difficulty, excuse me, have difficulty communicating with them because was, at best, they would just have a market Spanish, go to the market and sell corn or beans, but very limited. But the majority are becoming more and more conversant in Spanish, and many of the kids are going to school and look out, they're conversing probably even in English.
Now, which group did you work with when you were in Guatemala?
The Mam.
The Mam people.
Yeah.
And you just said something?
Yeah, in Mam. Well, we had to learn Mam. I'm not saying that I was very scholarly in
If
Mam.
we have any Mam speakers listening to us today, please confirm what Brother Marty just said.
Yeah. But I have enough, as Bill Woods would say, have enough to fool the people some of the time. All the people, no, but some of the people some of the time. And that really is a lot of fun, because you make your conversation from your strength, and they say, él habla como nosotros. He talks just like we do. But not so. They want to say that it's an association or bringing you closer to them by saying, well, he speaks just like we do. Would that it were true.
Now, when your people went into exile, basically into Mexico, you could have come home or you could have gone to another part of Guatemala. You stayed with them in the refugee camp.
Yeah.
Explain that.
Well, it was a bit of a surprise. I went over to Mexico looking for a little girl. She has polio. And I was wondering if she survived because she was living with her family, her father. And I knew that area in Guatemala was badly hit by the military.
What year would you say this is about?
Oh.
80.
That I went over to Mexico.
Yeah.
I was in Mexico from 84 to 88.
Yeah.
And Brother, can you talk about why they were fleeing, like at the genocide, but what was it all kind of like started by, like this whole war? Was it over land? Was it over, were they just killing people?
Bill Woods would be a good example. He was working in a colonization project in the Ishkan. And in the beginning, that went rather well. He was able to get land and bring in people. But the key is land. And then when they discovered what Bill was doing, and there were thousands of them going into the Ishkan, they're there now, and it's thriving after long and difficult work at putting it all back together again after the conflict. But it was a matter of land. And I do know that even when the military went into an area and decimated it, first they would go into the houses and rob anything they found of value. Then they would burn out the village. And then the woodcutters would come in. Oh, every one of those great big trees is like a bank account. And so it was economic. And yet they would say that it was communism, or it was just greed. Difficult.
So let's go back to that girl that little girl with polio you were trying to find.
Oh yeah, Simona. She's doing fine. She survived. Her sister didn't survive.
Excuse me.
And yet her sister was the one who could run and hide. But Simona, after so many operations that we had, she still walks with 2 crutches. And yet she escaped the massacre, got over to Mexico, and that's where I eventually caught up to her. And that's probably the reason I ended up living there, because I went up there looking to see if she had survived, and found her. And then I came back, and the bishop says, you know these people, who are they? You know, that whole thing of communism. Oh. And I said, no, these are people from Guatemala. They're fleeing the oppression of an inhuman institution, the Guatemalan military. And after we talked about it, he said, would you consider coming here and working, living with these people? Well, I never expected anything like that. And I said, surely, but I can't make my own assignments. So if you put it in writing, I'd be delighted to take it back and see what they say. Well, surprise, surprise. He put it in writing. And I went back to Guatemala, saw the regional superior, and they said, go for it. And I was off and going. But what do you do in a refugee camp when you don't know what you're doing? And it was easy. Right away, you had to do the basic things, water, latrines, housing. And so, but then nutrition was serious. We had a real case, an epidemic of proportions that the kids were dying. And we had to do something. And what we happened on was a yogurt project. This Mexican sister was bringing the yogurt into the refugee camp, and it was sloshing all over. And we thought, well, wait a minute. It's a warm climate there in Campeche. So maybe we can make the yogurt. And we gave it a try, and it worked. And it grew like topsy. I mean, in the beginning, we'd bring in 6 cases of powdered milk. In the end, we'd pack a truckload of powdered milk to be made into yogurt. And it really was remarkable how quickly the kids, you know, seemed like a matter of months that they showed signs of improved health and growth. So that's how I ended up over.
How long were you in the camp?
84 to 88.
4 years.
4 years. So
Yeah.
just to paint a picture here, was this solely with the Hmong people? I mean, were you working?
No, it was all of Guatemala, everybody.
Right, okay.
I was living in a Hmong section, and it would have been perfect for continued study in the language. But I didn't want to study Hmong as though I'm here for the Hmong people.
Right.
But no, it was a cross-section of that whole northern part of Guatemala where they just exited, went over to Belize, went up to Mexico to save the kids.
And how did the different indigenous people and groups get along? Because I know that's kind of in the South Sudan, it's like right now in the refugee camp, it's different tribes, and they all seem to sort of surprisingly live well with each other, despite their different views.
We did fine together.
Good.
I mean, that's Guatemala.
Right.
There was no difficulty there. We were all in dire straits trying to survive. And no, we all worked together. We had different groups, but that was for purposes or convenience of language.
Who was administering the camp? Was it the United Nations? Was it the Mexican government? Who was organizing?
It was Comar, which is the Mexican government. They were in control.
Right.
But the real source of all of this was the United Nations, the High Commission for Refugees. and they were great. Comar was difficult because, government agencies. But the United Nations, they were brilliant.
Was there any resistance on the part of the Mexicans to admitting refugees from Guatemala?
They brought the border people up to Campeche for a reason. That area is abandoned anyway, and it's awfully hot. But it's good for sugarcane and some agricultural production, and the only way that area is developing is because of the Guatemalan population. After we had the peace accords, then a lot of people went back to Guatemala, but an awful lot stayed. Thousands of them stayed over in Guatemala because many of them were born in Guatemala or married a Guatemalan, a Mexican. So I lost my train of thought.
Well, they might have also, they might have been afraid to go back to a degree as well, I'm sure.
But it was so difficult going back. Even where I lived the last 12 years with the return people, there was prejudice towards them in the beginning. The military seeding little conflict around the community saying, be careful, you know who these people are. And, well, it didn't take them long to realize that these people came, they set up a clinic and opened the clinic to everybody. They set up a school and opened the school to everybody from the neighborhood. So they found that these people were just good neighbors. And all of that division dissipated.
So tell us about the work that you're doing now and where you're located.
Well, I'm actually living in Guatemala City.
Okay.
Because after like 12 years of living in Santa Rita, it was difficult. We kind of get used to houses with windows and floors and stuff like that. But now I'm down in the city. Not that I couldn't return to the Peten, but I'm there. And strangely enough, I keep contact. Example, the clinic up in the Peten. I stay close to that because they can do so many things so beautifully. They can diagnose jungle diseases, rashes, snake bites. But oftentimes people come in and they don't have money for the serious things. Like oftentimes lately, we'd have a woman who needs a cesarean. Well, what are you going to do? She's going to get the attention that she needs. So we back them up and just be sure that chemotherapy, they can't afford chemotherapy. But with a little bit of help through the clinic, they get what they need, and they won't go away with a no for an answer or sorry, we can't do that. So our little clinic there is thriving, is beautiful. It's open today.
And it's in a pretty remote part, if my memory is correct and you explained it to me. It's
sure
not easy to get to.
Yeah, and it's not easy to get to good facilities, health facilities, clinic, hospital. So it really is a lifesaver for all the people who just have car fare, but they don't have enough to go in and see a doctor in town. Strange to say that, but it's the truth.
And who supports this clinic?
Oh. Well, the people pay a little bit, for the medicine. And I guess I do.
I was waiting for that answer because just so our audience understands the kind of man that they're listening to. I asked you that question before, and your answer to me was, well, you didn't seem like you wanted to answer the question. And then you went on and said, I get a small paycheck, and I don't really need that, so it goes to them.
Yeah, well, I do. I'm independently wealthy. I have Social Security, and that Social Security
Pays for this clinic.
Welcome. Yeah. And it's helpful.
Yeah.
Like we were talking coming down here, I just wish we were better neighbors. And I said that, with the immigration and the people in Central America, we are not very good neighbors. What we could do, is help our neighbors, and then they wouldn't be immigrating. And somebody says, yeah, well, don't we do that? Well, there's a hospital named after Roosevelt. That's about all I can name. You can't show me any projects that are sponsored by the United States. Other countries, yeah. The clinic was built by Canada. The relocation, we got help from Italy. We need help, but it's not coming from the United States. Sad to say. I lived in a refugee camp, and I think that refugee camp was a product of our foreign policy, the people that we aligned with here in Central America. And that oftentimes was an inhuman military.
Can we do some of Brother Marty's background?
Yeah.
Where are you from, and how did you get mixed up in this refugee business anyway? Go back to where you were born and raised, and how did you hear about Maryknoll?
Well, I'm from Chicopee Falls, Massachusetts, Western Massachusetts.
So that means you're a Yankee fan.
That means I'm a Democrat. So I was born in Chicopee Falls, and I'm so pleased and proud of Chicopee. It's just the salt of the earth, All right, so they call the churches the Irish church, the French church, the Polish church, the Greek church. But we live beautifully together. So that's where I started out from. And then I can remember hitchhiking to Springfield and out to the world, which would be down towards New York. And I ended up here in Bear Mountain Park as a counselor. A couple of $100 for the summer. That was money in those days. But one day I hitchhiked over here, and I can remember hitchhiking up this hill coming to Maryknoll, and it was just a beautiful experience. And I think that's how come I ended up here at Maryknoll. But it's Maryknoll that has been so beautiful.
So hold on, let me get this straight. You just hitchhiked here and showed up?
Yeah.
Isn't that great?
Yeah, I did. I remember one of the seminarians, he gave me a great big, not a big statue of Our Lady of Maryknoll. And I can remember hitchhiking with the statue. But those were the days, you know. You did what you could do. You didn't have cars. And so then I went on my way hitchhiking back to the boys' camp over in the Bear Mountain.
How is it you got into the Brothers program and not the seminary and priest program?
Well, to tell the truth, in the beginning I was just looking, and I did go to Glen Ellen. But there I met the Brothers, and I went to Chicago, where the Alexian Brothers have a hospital. And all of that seemed to speak to me about what I would like to do. Help people, mission, community, prayer. And so here I am, 66 years later, and still puttering along.
Now, brother, did you choose Guatemala?
No.
Or were you assigned there?
No, in those days you were just assigned.
Okay.
And I received an assignment to Guatemala, so I immediately went up to the library
And saw what part of Africa Guatemala is in, right?
and did some hurry-up reading about where I'm going.
And what language you'd have to learn.
But it was a blessing. I'm sure any place would have been the Spirit working. But the Guatemalans are a very gentle people, special people, loving people. And we kind of bonded.
Describe Guatemala minus the political and military mess that it's gotten itself into. For our listeners who've never been to Guatemala, what kind of country is it? What does it look like?
Oh, it's just beautiful. I mean, don't tell anybody, they'll all be moving to Guatemala. The climate is perfect. It's probably one of the best climates in the world. In the rainy season or the dry season, it's just a beautiful climate. And then, of course, you have beautiful people, gentle people, really. If it wasn't for militarism and the military, we're very productive. Our main industry is agricultural production, corn and beans, of course, our heritage from the Maya. But we also have petroleum, mining, energy, rivers, lakes, 2 oceans, jungles. It's just a wealth of a country.
When I was there in '86, I think it was, what struck me was how colorful the country is. Not just the flowers, which are everywhere, and the birds, which are everywhere, but each village was of a different group, and they each had a different costume, native costume, which they made themselves.
Sure.
They were there weaving.
Sure. That's part of their identity. You can almost tell from a distance where that woman is from. Oh, she's Mam, she's Kekchi, she's Quiche. They all have they wear this beautiful dress. But it is one of the most colorful places in the world. And people come down and buy material. And I buy material. Like I go up to where Stan Rother was killed. And they are so colorful. I just buy a piece of the colorful cloth and frame that. And I've used it for gifts for people. Because there's birds in there, there's leaves and trees and other things of nature. Wow, they are so in harmony with their world.
So what was your first impression when you, as a young brother, you arrive in Guatemala, you get off the plane, what strikes you first when you arrived?
oh boy, I think I was so frightened. Because I had trouble learning Spanish in the beginning. And I thought, maybe this won't work out. But then I began, with a little help from good friends at the language school in Huehuetenango, I began to take a few baby steps. And now I did a repaso, a renewal course some years back in Cochabamba, and I was so pleased. I mean, I could speak Spanish, and I can. Probably not the best, but it's good. I'm surprised at how my fears dissipated and my joy increased. And that joy continues. Even when I'm up here, I feel a little sad because, I don't know, somos Chapines, we're really kind of one.
Seems like Guatemala's your home now.
Yeah. And I had to call up a lot of people saying I'm going up to New York, and they, you know, it's like family. It is family. In fact, friendship is even something special. Friendship.
Was there an experience that stands out in your memory? A time or experience or a person where you knew that this was the right decision, that God had put you in this place, that this was...
Yeah. Well, the one place, I was in Huehuetenango working, and we had a school program with CARE. And then all of this began to happen. And the people were flooding out, crossing the river, the Usumacinta, which is a big river, and going over any place to save the kids, save their families. And went up to Mexico. And that was a surprise. I didn't know what to expect, but then the bishop asked me if I would come, and I think that was like a turning point in my life. And I heard myself saying recently that it was through Maryknoll that I found my vocation. Your vocation? Yeah. My vocation is to save the kids. That has become the mantra within my life. And I don't know, I think we saved with that yogurt program and different things that we did. But I think my life changed going over to Mexico, going up to the refugee camps. I didn't intend to. I just thought I'd see if Simona had survived. Well, she survived, and the next thing I know, I was back up there living and working in the refugee camps. But that was, I sort of understood what the Spirit was trying so hard to do in me. But it took the kids to wake me up.
You have this collection of your poetry and your photographs. Would you choose one or two and read them for us that you think catches your spirit?
Well, if I could, I'd like to read this, the introduction.
Okay.
And there's a picture here of the refugee camp. And I wrote, Christmas Found. As the pieces of this story came together, I realized that it focused on the children saved during a time of genocide in Guatemala. In them, we discovered the newness of life, and God, who continued with us in the stable of a refugee camp in Mexico. And then I wrote at the end, we dedicated this, I read this, I think, but it's dedicated to all the kids. Those among the 200,000 that didn't survive during the years of genocide in Guatemala. Those that survive, these are their pictures and their stories. And the new generation being born, bringing life back to life in this beautiful land. This is their story. This is our story. Amen.
Now, Brother Shea, you knew the recently beatified Father Stan Rother.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about, your relationship with him and the influence he's had on you?
Sure. Oh, it's just the most marvelous thing. It's sort of like Stan is a vindication of all that we've been trying to do. And he came down from Oklahoma. Maryknoll had looked at that area earlier on, and it was Maryknoll that actually helped facilitate the diocese in the United States to take parishes there, like San Lucas Toliman and Santiago Atitlan. And so they came down from Oklahoma, and Stan used to come in to the center house, just like everybody else, kind of a quiet man. And he'd kind of sneak out back and smoke his pipe. And just a beautiful person. But then he went up home, and in talking with his family and all, he gave a talk one day. And a couple of people in the crowd took exception to what he was saying about the Guatemalan government, the military. And they actually denounced him to, I think, the Guatemalan embassy. And they have this all documented up there in Oklahoma. And so Stan knew that his life was in danger. And he even told his dad, if they do anything, they're not going to get me out of the convento, out of the house there, because they would torture him, and he would say things that he was afraid he would say things that would jeopardize the security of the people. And that's exactly what happened. They knocked on the door, and they didn't break down the door, so somehow they got in, and they talked to a person inside and ordered them to take them to El Padre, the priest. So they did, and then what followed was brutal. It was a battle, and there's a bullet hole in the chapel there that pierced the mosaico, the floor, and they killed Stan right there. Then they brought the body down to the center house, and we waked the body there. And then the body was sent back to Oklahoma. But they worked out something whereby the heart was taken back to Santiago Atitlan, and that's where his heart is buried. So that's like a major relic now in the main chapel, in the main church. And it's an experience to go up to Santiago now. Not that it always wasn't, but the numbers of people that come is just incredible. 6 o'clock in the morning, You know, that's awfully early to be going to church. And you wouldn't believe it. You can hardly squeak in. And then 10 o'clock and 12 o'clock and 4 o'clock. The spirit of sin is still very much present among the people. And it's so nice to tell the story. I mean, it seems to be a vindication of all that we were trying to do. Just help the people have a life, live a life, have their families, have their children. That's all we're trying to do. And I shouldn't be negative, but I wish we were better neighbors and help the people there. They don't want to come up here.
Right.
Help them there and be good neighbors.
Thank you so much, Brother Marty. It was enlightening and inspiring to talk to you, as always.
Thank you all very much. It's been fun.
You've been listening to the Maryknoll Podcast Among the People. To learn more about the work of Maryknoll around the world, visit our website, maryknollsociety.org. Or if you'd like to subscribe to our English or Spanish magazines, visit maryknollmagazine.org. You know, we'd really like to hear what you have to say about this episode, so please leave your reviews, comments, or questions below. And feel free to share this podcast with friends or anyone you feel may be interested. This has been Maryknoll Father Joe Veneroso, along with co-host Megan Fleming, for Among the People. Till next time.
You